leading candidates in the Liberal leadership race have both suggested that they'll take the consumer carbon piece out.
You believe them?
Tax out. Well, it doesn't matter what I think. You're the one who wants to be Prime Minister.
So let's look at what we're talking about. You've got carbon tax Christia. I call her that because she was the finance minister who not only kept the carbon tax but raised it by 167%.
But now she's saying she'd take it off.
Oh, yes, we should believe her now. Right before a leadership vote and an election, she claims that she's been wrong for the last 9 years.
Pierre Poilievre did something pretty unexpected that has a lot of his base saying, you've lost us, and worse, you're just like Trudeau. We are going to be talking all about that, as well as Premier Danielle Smith. She has shared some more details about her meeting with Donald Trump and some of the things that they said to each other. We have some recent interviews from Stephen Harper, and I also want to give a little bit of a shout out to Northern Perspective, as they had on a former Liberal MP who had some scathing things to say about Mr. Mark Carney. We're actually going to get into that story first. I'm Jasmine Lane. This is Over Opinionated. Subscribe to the channel, like, comment your thoughts down below, and give me a follow on other social media platforms as well.
What, cutting through everything, what should Canadians really be afraid of with Mark Carney?
Well, trying to find where this party finds itself on the spectrum has it at the far left. It isn't the center where we were, and it wasn't a party that pursued socialism. But this is a party that, and its apparent would-be leader, Mark Carney, would like to see systems like social credit. So in other words, reduce the standard of living in the country, have people driving around on bicycles in their 15-minute cities, which is why Stephen Guilbeault supported him. Impose on Canadians hardship, the likes of which they are starting to experience and they don't like, while at the same time the rest of the world is passing us by, watching our economic performance. Our GDP per capita dropped to the lowest levels among OECD countries inevitably. This is a man who represents continuity of bad policy. This is the face, the man behind the curtains, if you will, operating the levers on Justin Trudeau. So as the country has declined, a lot of people ask, well, where's this coming from? It comes from a man who obviously had very little interest in investing in Canada, a lot more interest in making sure that the things he doesn't like are invested abroad, whether he's a technocrat or not. I think it's important because he tries to present himself as being something that he clearly is not. He has no common sense of what people are going through. He is a person who has been lifted on a silver spoon, and I take nothing away from the fact that he's probably very talented at what he does, but he's not right suited for what is required in politics, and that's the ability to understand ordinary person's struggles. He doesn't get it. In fact, he's had everything to do with making the life and the ordeal of most Canadians that much more arduous and difficult. And so Carney is very unapologetic. The very fact that he has Gerald Butts and Katie Telford and the same group of Liberals behind Justin Trudeau behind him, that should be an alarm, as well as his wife. And I don't like to bring in, our backgrounds, but his wife is part of the Eurasia group, part of the most militant of climate, catastrophists out there, Diane Fox, I should say, Carney. There's no doubt in my mind these people are committed to their green agenda, which it does not include human beings in terms of their ability to make ends meet unless they're prepared to accept a significant decline in their standard of living. He's extraordinarily dangerous for this country.
Yeah, Mark Carney has quite the history. His wife, by the way, she has actually, her businesses have received massive amounts of federal money from Canada for green initiatives, massive amounts. And so it's one of those things, you follow the money trail, and boy, oh boy, it is sad. It is so disappointing to follow it, but you will always see that it does line the pockets of some of these individuals, people who have investments in other companies. Guilbeault is very much the same, and we saw that with Carney as well. Not to mention the fact that his wife's sister, so Mark Carney's sister-in-law, was very close friends with Ghislaine Maxwell. Whether or not she knew about that, all of that stuff, who knows? That fact alone, that Carney's wife is so lavishly wealthy to the point where her sister is friends with Ghislaine Maxwell, knows Jeffrey Epstein. That is such an elite inner circle of individuals there. Like, this is a man who, and actually you can prove this as well, because when's the last time Mark Carney was out with the general public? Have you ever seen it? No? It's because he isn't ever. He's never, ever out with the general public because he operates in these little circles that are very much funded by the WEF and very much the climate goal, without a doubt, is to sacrifice the poor in order to make the rich even richer. And Mark Carney as well, a prime example where, yeah, he actually doesn't invest in Canada. He recently pulled his multi-trillion-dollar business out of Canada due to the high taxes that he encouraged the Trudeau government to implement on Canadians that were too high for even his businesses to thrive in the country. So he pulled out, moved his business over to New York, if I'm not mistaken. And we've also seen him be very adamant on shutting down Canadian resources, Canadian productivity, shutting down pipelines, very much in support of canceling all of those projects, while he himself owns shares in other pipeline projects in South America and beyond that he profits from greatly. So by opposing what Canada is doing while also making your riches on that same product, all you're really doing there decision-wise is making sure that your companies have less competition in the landscape. Everything about it is incredibly demonic. It's incredibly evil. And yes, Mark Carney scares the bejesus out of me.
Why? You're still not explaining what your views are on the World Economic Forum. Like, what do you find distasteful about it?
I guess I find it distasteful when billionaires brag about how much control they have over political leaders, as the head of that organization has. And I think that that is offensive. The people who should be directing government are the people who vote for them. And the people who vote for me and for my colleagues are people who live in Alberta and who are affected by our decisions. And so, quite frankly, until that organization stops bragging about how much control they have over political leaders, I have no interest in being involved with them. My focus is here in Alberta, solving problems for Albertans with the mandate from Alberta.
And on that note, I hope this doesn't get me demonetized from YouTube. If it does, though, there is a PayPal link in the description in case you feel like contributing to the show in any capacity. So this popped up on my feed earlier today. It says record escort bookings at Davos 2025. Like, these are Mark Carney's people. This is his close-knit inner circle, is the people who attend the World Economic Forum, where they go and fly in on all these private jets and helicopters and whatnot to go and talk about how we need to, make lab-grown meat, because apparently that's going to solve something in the world. It says that they have seen an increased demand for escorts and fun parties among its attendees. According to reports from escort agencies, over 300 escorts were reportedly booked during the event, which hosted more than 3,000 business and political leaders. Such activities have sparked discussions on the ethical conduct and transparency of global elites. Yeah, the ethical conduct and transparency of global elites. I'd love for Mark Carney to be pressed on that one. And on that same note of the WEF, the demons, the lizard people, whatever it is you want to call them, the globalists, the elites that want to control and run society for their own gain while using compassion and guilt and shame as a tool to make you bend the knee to them. This interview came out just a few hours ago, and I'll be honest, obviously I'm younger, I'm 28 years old, and I do remember Stephen Harper very vividly throughout my younger years, definitely. But wow, I think I have a newfound respect for this man and his intelligence and knowledge after what he shared.
The real problem in the West is not that our prospects are not good. It's elements in our own countries and our own societies that do not want us to succeed. Yeah. They do not want us to succeed.
They want to tear down the current system.
They want to tear down. The modern left, called Marxist often, is not really socialist. It's nihilist. Its ethics are entirely nihilist. And it's all about ripping everything down. I could go into, all the reasons why I think this is so. It doesn't really matter what the explanation for it is. It's all bad, and it needs to be fought and opposed. Yep. And the desire we all have to make constant change in our progress in our societies should not have as its assumption that everything is wrong and terrible and awful. Quite the contrary. It's that our societies are sufficiently good at their core that this kind of progress is always possible. Yep. And, look, Canada, the United States, obviously speaks specifically in my own country. And I can see lots of things wrong with my own country, and you can see lots wrong with yours. But yet, I can tell you travel around the world, and there's no other time in history and no other place you'd rather be. Yeah. So, it's not that there aren't problems, historical and present, that are real. But the core of our countries are great, and they have great futures, and there is no alternative. The adolescent egos of the woke university crowd is not an alternative governing philosophy for any society. And
where's this illiberalism coming from? As you just complicate, you call it nihilist, but there's this. It's new on the left to have this illiberalism, right? And that's something that we didn't really have that as much, or did we always have this massive?
Well,
illiberalism?
it's always been on the extreme left.
But it's kind of, it's leaked into the rest of society.
What the far left and the far right always have in common.
They're both illiberal.
Yeah, they're both illiberal.
But more of the left seems to have taken.
But if you look, go right back to Marx and Engels, of which I'm actually very knowledgeable. I mean, it was always illiberal. Yeah. It was always illiberal. And anyone who says that, Marxism was distorted into totalitarianism by the Soviets or the Chinese, whoever, is missing the whole. You read original Marxism, the totalitarianism is at its root. Mm-hmm. Marx's view was that. And you hear the same terms thrown around today, that his opinions were not opinions, they were science. And anyone who disagreed with his thoughts on what is happening today or what will happen in the future is not merely wrong on the issue, he is going against the fundamental science of humanity.
Really, so Marx would say you're going against science when you disagree with me a lot.
And therefore, because you're simply arguing against facts, then you get to the kind of Soviet mentality that all dissent is essentially a mental illness or something that needs to be re-educated and corrected,
or banned from social media.
And
no doubt.
And this has been that crowd's philosophy, going back, by the way, before Marx to Rousseau and others. And it's become now, since the 60s, very large in university movements and university campuses.
Are we at a cultural tipping point? This is spread everywhere. Is this going to continue? Are we reaching a peak? How's this going to play out?
I hope it doesn't. If it plays out, our societies fail. Remember that what's so threatening about what I say is the kind of far woke left is that it's trying to end the democratic system. I mean, it's not just trying to pass big deficits in modern monetary theory and new education systems. It's trying to snuff out any opposition to those things. Its goal is authoritarianism.
Yeah, so you stop freedom of speech, freedom of conscience, freedom of thought, freedom of property.
Moving on to a recent interview that Pierre Poilievre did with CTV. To our surprise, we thought he was done with those guys, but I guess Atlantic Canada still has a sweet spot in his heart. I first, though, want to share with you what Jordan Peterson said. He was at a Turning Point USA, their inaugural Eve ball that they threw ahead of Donald Trump's inauguration. And he had some things to say about the 51st state.
What do you think about that? Trump is preparing to renegotiate a whole series of international agreements, and he's doing what he usually does, which is to push for advantage hard and to see what happens, and to establish, what would you say, an anchor that is beyond even what he might hope to achieve, so that he can achieve half of that and be thrilled about it. He's very good at that. And I think Trump also floats these propositions as a trial balloon. He's obviously a guy who's willing to see what'll happen. And so he likes to stir the pot. And he's doing that very effectively at the moment in relationship to Canada and Greenland and Panama.
And what did Pierre Poilievre have to say about this? We are also going to go through some of the comments from some of his supporters, maybe now former supporters, who were very much opposed to his take on the situation.
Well, I don't want to, if you don't mind, I'd like to list a few things. One would obviously...
The more you want to list, the better.
Thank
I think
you.
people would like to get some specifics about how we're going to tackle this.
President Trump is a deal maker. He wants to win. But we're both going to lose as Americans and Canadians if we get into a trade war. So what I would say is, how do we position the decision for him so that he understands that America can only win if it allows open, unbridled free trade with Canada. So I would retaliate, and I would target products and services that A, we don't need, B, we can make ourselves, and see that we can buy elsewhere so that we maximize impact on the Americans while minimizing impact on Canadians. Secondly, I would pass an emergency, bring it home tax cut on work, investment, making stuff in Canada, energy, home building, so that we can stimulate more economic growth here. 3, we need to become more self-sufficient. That means knocking down barriers, more interprovincial free trade. We have freer trade with the Americans today than we do with ourselves. We have to knock down those barriers, build pipelines, LNG liquefaction facilities to sell our stuff to the world without having to go through the Americans. If they're going to be an unreliable trade partner, we've got to find ways to sell more to ourselves and more to the rest of the world.
Do you see it as a dollar-for-dollar retaliation?
I would say so, yeah. It has to hit hard.
Now, unfortunately, there is a section of this interview that has gone very viral that does not include everything that Poilievre said, and that has now caused a lot of people to make comments like this. The only people they're going to hit hard is the average Canadian. Instead of just securing the border, they'll risk getting into an economic tit for tat with a country 10 times our size, totally irresponsible. So the plan is to impoverish us further because the people it's going to hit hard is the little guy, not the multi-millionaire career politician. Unacceptable Matthew says, lost my vote. Craig adding, now we can't afford conservatives either. Now, to be fair with you, I do agree that a dollar-for-dollar tariff sounds absolutely horrendous. However, if you listen to the full interview, he definitely does emphasize the fact that he doesn't want these to happen at all and that we really need to plead our case to the United States. Actually, Compulsive Contrarian wrote on X, he's speaking to the people lost in seeking revenge. If he didn't say it, he would be called a Trump supporter. So true. He also said his plan is sound. Tariff the things we must buy, start producing or purchase from other suppliers the things we don't. If we want new export markets, purchasing from them creates friendly trade relations. Otherwise, reduce taxes, remove domestic barriers to trade, and eliminate regulations that impede development.
And again, we have to be very pinpoint and surgical to make sure we're maximizing impact on the American side while minimizing impact on our side.
You talk about self-reliance. Have successive governments in Canada over the decades of all stripes become too reliant, too comfortable with the notion that U.S. will always be our biggest trade partner and they're always right there and we can put it on autopilot?
Yes, we live next door to the biggest military and economic superpower the world has ever seen. So a lot of our economics have just been based on enjoying, basking in that glow, but we can't rely on it. And so, right now, according to Stats Can, we have about a 7% effective tariff on goods between provinces. And we remember the Como decision. Some poor guy got fined because he brought alcohol from
Northern New Brunswick.
Yes, I think he was from Northern New Brunswick to Quebec. And we got to knock down those barriers. We have to approve resource projects that allow us to get our stuff to market without going through the States. Right now, we are importing oil from the Americans and the Saudis in the East at world prices, and we're selling it to the Americans at discounts in the West. It's a crazy business model. We need pipelines, we need LNG plants, we need to approve resource projects quickly so that we can become self-reliant and start making things here in Canada.
And here is a little bit more insight from Premier Danielle Smith on the whole situation.
Why I think we have to make a very strong case about how it is that we are a partner. What I'm hearing the U.S. president say is that he's frustrated that we're not pulling our weight when it comes to national security and defense of North America, and in particular our Arctic. We got to fix that. He doesn't believe that we're pulling our weight when it comes to border security. I don't think that they want to see a bunch of migrants that they remove coming to Canada and biding their time to sneak back in at some future point. We have to give them confidence that that's not going to happen on our border. So I think in some ways we're having a tariff dispute. In some ways we're having a trade dispute. But in other ways, I think it's a bigger conversation. And that if we can address those concerns, then we might be able to go back to talking about trade and our ongoing relationship, making it tariff-free. But I think we haven't, what I'm seeing with the continuous threats that we're seeing from the U.S. is that those issues haven't been satisfied to the satisfaction of the U.S. president yet.
And I'd prefer to start working on those things rather than talking about retaliation.
What do you think about all of this? Do you agree Pierre Poilievre is a traitor? Do you agree Danielle Smith is a traitor? Also, I'd really like to know what you think about what Stephen Harper had to say. That interview caught me by surprise. I'm Jasmine Lane. This is Over Opinionated. Thank you so much for watching. You can subscribe to the show. I'm also available on Rumble and Spotify. Like the video, comment your thoughts down below, and I will talk to you very, very soon.